Welcome back, everyone, to OpenLine. Glad you're with us. We're taking a look inside at least one juvenile detention facility here in the state of Tennessee that's run by the Department of Children's Services. A report's coming out tomorrow called Designed to Fail. And monitors have gone inside the Wilder Youth Detention Center, which is outside of Memphis, since September of 2020. For more than a year, monitors have been going inside that facility, and they have put together this report. And it's quite a read. It's very interesting. It details many abuses and is calling for major change there at the Department of Children's Services as it relates to these youth detention facilities. We have with us Jack Derryberry, Legal Director with Disability Rights Tennessee, and Jennifer Rodriguez, Executive Director of the Youth Law Center. And Jack, I'll start with you again. Why should every person in Tennessee be concerned? Some might say, you know, this doesn't affect me. How does this affect every person in Tennessee?
Well, how it affects every person, Ben, is that these children are going to be coming back into their home communities. And if you are a taxpayer who is paying some of the $407 it takes to serve these children each day under the Department of Children's Services budget, then you would be concerned about the proper use of your taxpayer dollars. You would also be concerned about the children who are in the custody of the Department of Children's Services, receiving the services that they need to be able to return to the community safely as productive citizens to lead a productive life. And as I've said, in order to do that, you have to properly assess the children's needs, you have to develop a plan of services, and you have to carry out that plan of services. And if that is not being done, then the Department of Children's Services is not complying with the statutes that they operate under, and any citizen would be concerned about that.
You're saying they're not following the law. You're saying they're breaking the law. Is that right, Jennifer? I mean, is that what is being said here?
That's correct. And there are laws that Department of Children's Services has to keep children safe, that they have to provide them the state required and federally required education, that they have to be providing physical and mental health services, and particularly for the youth, so many of them do have disabilities. For the youth who have disabilities, there's a whole range of services and supports that they are required to provide that we just are not seeing.
Jack, how long has this been going on? You all obviously started monitoring in September of 2020. You started monitoring because you heard things that concerned you. How long do you think things have been as bad as what you're describing in this report?
Well, we don't know, Ben. We weren't in there before September of 2020, so it's just not possible to know. And so I don't think that for me to say how long has it been going on, I don't know how long it's been going on.
How concerned are you that it's been going on a long time?
Well, I would say that for things to get as out of compliance with the statutes that they operate under, for these situations to be at the state that they are, that doesn't happen overnight. You know, the train doesn't run off the tracks. Somebody has to not maintain the tracks, not take care of the engine, not do the right signaling, not do the right planning, and all of a sudden it goes off the tracks. But that didn't happen all of a sudden in September of 2020. It had to have been going on for a period of time, but you know, if you had a program that was in compliance before, and we don't know whether it was or wasn't, but if you had one that was in compliance, then it's not going to overnight be out of compliance. You have to lose the esprit de corps, the supervision, the management, the planning for services over a period of time. And if staff realizes that they're not going to be held to the high standards that they were before, over that period of time, services and the quality of services will deteriorate.
And I know we're here to preview this report. Again, it's coming out tomorrow. I'll be doing a story on it. But maybe each of you could pick something that just alarms you the most, or a general thing that alarms you the most. And Jennifer, I might start with you if that's all right. What kind of, just to give people an idea of what it is we're talking about. We've given them some sense of it, but hammer home again what it is we're talking about that maybe alarmed you the most, that you think really speaks to the seriousness of this situation.
Well, I shared earlier the story of one child that's really representative of the story of so many other children who are the most vulnerable, right, in Tennessee. I mean, all of our national data say that the majority of children who are in these kind of facilities have experienced multiple forms of abuse or neglect before landing in the care of Department of Children and Services. But I'll just share another story that it really illustrates the kind of thing that worries me the most. A child who had intellectual disabilities, who had mental health services, came into Wilder again with the idea that his needs would be met in this facility, received no assessment, and so no services at all were provided to this particular child. And this is a child who promptly ended up in solitary confinement, not receiving any education, not receiving any services at all. And so as you can imagine, the impact of that kind of experience of being isolated for 23 hours at a time, for not having contact with other human beings, for having really extreme needs that you're not getting any support at all for. You know, what that means, both in the trajectory of this child's life and what happens to them when they return home, because it's important for all your viewers to understand, children are at these facilities for a relatively short period of time and then they come home. And so when you have a facility that's actually adding to the trauma, and in some cases, I think you could say they are creating hardened criminals. There were children who, in the course of Disability Right Tennessee's interviews, said, please transfer me to an adult facility because I think I'll be treated better at an adult prison. I mean, that can't happen. That is so, from our perspective at the Youth Law Center, that's incredibly concerning. Our entire youth justice system is set up under the guise that these are children and that we have an obligation and an opportunity to change the course of their life for the better. So this kind of treatment, the fact that we are, doing something that is even worse than the most sort of hardened adult criminal would experience, it is just unconscionable. And as you mentioned before, it's illegal.
And you're saying that there are kids that go there who are expecting services, or maybe even judges or people in the system that are expecting kids to get certain services, and you're saying those services, that's not happening. That's not happening there.
That's correct. I think there are children who are expecting services. There are families that are depending on Wilder to provide services. There are certainly community members who say, this is a child who is behaving in ways that make it difficult for me to go about my daily life. I'm taking some comfort in the idea that they are somewhere getting help and they will be returning better. And certainly courts and public defenders, lawyers are all have an expectation that if we are ordering a child someplace under the guise of rehabilitation, that they will not be instead abused, neglected, tortured, isolated, deprived of education, medical and health care. I am certain that is not what any of our government systems or the public expects.
Now, Jack, I did several stories about solitary confinement inside juvenile detention facilities. And the law was passed. A law was passed by the legislature last year that closed a loophole, and that law was designed to prevent solitary confinement in juvenile detention facilities. Solitary confinement being defined as spending 23 hours a day or more in a cell, in a room. What I'm hearing said here is that it is still continuing. Are you saying solitary confinement, despite that law, is still continuing?
Yes, Ben. Unfortunately, we are saying that, and we know that from observation, from talking with youth, from looking at records of the Department of Children's Services, where children are placed and for how long. The statute that you're talking about and the amendment of it, in essence, said that a youth cannot be placed in solitary confinement or seclusion for more than 2 hours, and then the superintendent or the manager of the facility can increase that number in 2 more 2-hour segments, so a total of 6 hours. But at the very last minute in the legislature's consideration, the loophole that was closed by the statute was reopened by an amendment on the bill, which in essence said that the department can create a rule or a policy that will look at alternative options, and that can include extending the maximum period of time in seclusion. And we obviously monitored the facility and investigated after that statute was passed and found many youth who were there in their cells for 23 hours a day. We found youth who not only were in their cells for 23 hours a day, but also were not getting outside for 1 hour a day of large motor exercise, which they are supposed to get. And all of the studies have shown that solitary confinement not only is a punishment, which they are not supposed to be punishing these children, they're supposed to be rehabilitating them and treating them. So it cannot be used as punishment, but it is. But also, solitary confinement is one more event of trauma in the lives of these children. It is what the psychologists call an adverse childhood experience, and that trauma goes with that child for the rest of their life.
Well, and the lawmakers said that. I mean, everyone agrees that solitary confinement is inappropriate, and so why does it continue to happen? And we've got to go to break, but Jennifer, I'm going to ask you, I mean, are you aware of other states where this happens? We just passed a law, and now you're saying there was a loophole that allows them to keep doing this. Why can't we get this right in Tennessee? And are there other states that have similar loopholes and do similar things? Or is Tennessee unusual? What would you say, Jennifer?
Tennessee is relatively unusual. There is a growing smaller and smaller number of states who use this practice, because it is not only an adverse child experience, but it really amounts to psychological torture for so many young people. As the legislature is considered, not only does it add stress, but it actually creates suicidal ideation in young people. It can lead to mental health conditions. And I want to emphasize that the reason when your viewers think about a child who's put in solitary confinement, they may be thinking that this is a young person who's dangerous, who is getting into fights, who's threatening the safety of other people. One of the children that Disability Rights Tennessee's interviewed had been placed in solitary confinement over 40 times in a year for reasons like not getting out of the shower when asked, swinging on shower pipes, for doing things that, quite honestly, my children do, for being a child, essentially. And I think the reason that systems have such a hard time moving away from this is that it is used as a control and punishment mechanism. And in a very large facility with staff who are not well trained and are not equipped to deal with trauma and regular children's behavior, they have very few tools in their toolbox currently. And so this is a go-to move.
All right, we have to take a break. All right, then let's come back and talk about staffing there. You talk about training and just staffing levels. Let's talk about that when we come back. We'll take a break. Be back right after this.